Hey man, how's it going?
Not bad. How you doing?
You want to talk about reality TV, unfiltered sake, or the color pink?
Uh, I only am spending much time doing two of those things these days, so we don't have to cover sake.
Pink is never going to die.
It isn't. I've often asked myself whether it was a fad, and it isn't. I looked at my wardrobe the other day, and I keep buying it. Um, so I think I really do like stuff that's pink.
How many pairs of socks do you think you own with pink in them anywhere in the sock?
Six.
Okay, I would have gone, the over under for me would have been like eight.
Well, I mean, I guess th- that's a weird over under given that you don't know how many pairs of socks I own
That's
and
true.
like it's sort of an underspecified problem.
Yeah, I like to get rid of my stuff, like I don't like to keep stuff around. My policy is like if I buy a new thing, like a new pair of socks, I have to get rid of the old pair of socks, which really keeps me from buying new socks.
But fair enough. I don't. I just accumulate until it becomes unbearable.
And only
And
six. Wow.
I will say, if you had asked me how many pairs of pink shorts I have,
Right.
uh, now we're pushing double digits
Yeah.
on that
Like you
front.
can't remember, basically, is where you get to.
Yeah, and two I think are actually the same pair. But I felt like I needed a backup just in case one
Oh,
wore
right.
out.
This is a life. This is like an old man life hack, actually. If you find a piece of clothing that you like, what's the rule that says you only should have one? Like, why not just buy one for every day of the week?
Right, right. You could do the Steve Jobs thing that way. I will say I learned that hack maybe too early in life, or maybe I should say that I'm aware of that, but I tend to do this thing where I get too excited about things and like I wear them for a couple days. I'm like, oh, this is rad. I need to have like I might as well just buy one in every color or something like
Right.
that. And then I get them, and then a couple weeks later, I'm like, well, wasn't as good as I thought it was. And now I've got four of them or something like that. And I'm literally, this is something I'm trying to resist. Uh, I'll say as we speak, it's not something that I'm currently trying to keep out of mind, but I bought a pair of pants this past weekend. I think they're fantastic right now. I wanted to go online and order like three more colors, just be like, this is my new pants, and just have it fill out my week. But I'm telling myself, no, wear it a few more times. Be sure. Maybe wash it. See how it washes, wears after washing.
And how do you feel? I mean, you're not far enough along the process to figure it out.
Not yet, but it's like
Yeah.
it's making my eye twitch. I want to know.
Well, this is the other adult life hack is like learning from your mistakes. This is next level. This comes after buying multiple pairs of the same pants.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. And the other thing about I don't know why I spend so much time thinking about these things, but I think about relatively frequently is that clothes I now get tired of them before they wear out. Like when I was even through college, and maybe graduate school and stuff like that, I would wear out clothes with some frequency, and now they just don't wear out. So if I want something like you were saying, if you buy something, you have to get rid of something. If one of my issues is that it used to be kind of easy. I'd have to buy new things with some regularity because I would wear shit out. And now
Right.
I'm like, well, I could buy this, but I don't really need a new pair of khakis or fill in the blank.
Yeah. There's a difference between me and my partner. She likes to buy stuff because she wants new stuff. And I'm like, but I have a thing like that already.
I
Yeah.
I have also thought about this thing specifically too. There are certain things where I feel like I never quite get the right one. I always want a new one. The grass is greener. And then for other things, I have just found it and like the desire goes away. Like that is the one. I'm gonna stick with it. My
Yeah.
wallet is like that. I
I
have no
am.
interests in wallets now other than the one I have. Where I used to, that would be the kind of thing I'd be like, oh, that one looks pretty nice. Let me see what
Uh-huh.
that one's got going on.
I was trying to think about when we met, and I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I had a flip phone, a MySpace account, and I used to get DVDs in the mail from Netflix when we
Yeah,
met.
well, we met probably in the winter. but by phone. We met in the winter of 2005.
Oh, right. I remember that
Or
conversation in detail. If that's the time we met, I just didn't know if we'd met before that.
or actually it would have been maybe it was the, early, it was still winter, but winter, maybe it was like early 2006. And then we met IRL later that summer in 2006.
I remember that conversation distinctly. I can tell you exactly where I was sitting during that conversation. You were applying to graduate school,
Right.
and you were applying to work with my advisor, Les Morey, as well as
Yeah.
your eventual advisor, Aaron Pincus. And in fact, it says something about us and my career that people often think that Aaron was my advisor, but actually Les was. Either
Yeah.
would have been great, but I was happy to work with Les. And I was trying to convince you to come to Texas, the tough sell for a person with background in Texas like you. And it turned out okay, I guess, for both of us.
Yeah, no, I think it turned out the way the way it should have. Or anyway, this is another thing I think about a lot of, like, if you fantasize about something different in the past, does that mean you don't like your current state? Even if you like your current state, I think it's just a personality feature of whether you fantasize about things in the past or have regret, etc. But I think it worked out well. I think, there was I had a partner at the time, who is now my wife, who had expressed uh, some reluctance about going to Texas, we'll say.
Yeah, it's people have opinions about this sort of thing. Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I fantasize about the future. I fantasize about people's eulogies because I'm a very sentimental person, as you know. Part
And
of the reason
morose.
part of the reason we're talking right now, but also kind of a dark person. So
Yeah,
dude, I'll be like walking my dog and I'll go through an entire eulogy, like if I had to give a friend's eulogy, and I'll start crying because like, it's really sentimental, but also, yeah,
yeah, but
not
dark.
uplifting.
No, yeah, if you're high on the dimension of morosity or darkness and sentimentality, this is what you'll do.
Okay, so go back to this time. So you go to work with Aaron. Did you have like, how aware, where were you of like what you wanted to do? Did you say like, I'm going to be Aidan Wright, professor of endowed whatever at University of Michigan one day? Or do you like see how it goes? Or, I mean, because I recall both of us were fairly ambitious. We had that in common.
Yeah,
But I kind of had no idea what I wanted to do really and where I would end up. And you can't know on some level.
yeah.
But how conscious were you about this? How much of this, like, this is my goalpost and I'm aiming there?
That's a good question. And I've thought a little bit about this in the past. I agree, we both shared a lot of ambition, and I both had a lot of ambition then and continue to have a lot of ambition, although I think it changes in terms of what one's ambition is about, or at least it has for me. But I was very ambitious at the time, but I didn't have solid targets. I didn't know exactly what I was ambitioning towards. And so in that regard, yeah, no, this where I ended up, it got shaped over time, but there was no real target then.
I mean, you've had students, I've had students, we've all known students and been students. And there is a point, like, so I grew up in a small town, right? And when you grow up in a small town, you like at some point in children's lives, you see like those are the kids that are going to stay in this small town forever. And those are the kids that are going to leave and never come back. And I was in the latter category. And with
Yeah,
PhDs students, it's sort of the same. You think, well, these are the people who are going to continue doing research their entire life because they love it. They seem to be good at it. And these are the ones that are going to find they're going to be good at something. If you're in a PhD program, you're good at lots of things. These ones
yeah.
are going to be good at something else and they're going to do something else. When did you feel like I'm able to do this? I'm competent. This is my identity. This is what I'm going for.
That's a good question. I think it went in phases. Like the thing I think you can't discount is how naive I was at various points, and so unaware of the full picture of things. So if we really want to go far enough back, I was an undergraduate and I sort of got turned on to the psychology thing. And I thought, like, yeah, that would be a pretty cool career going on and being a psychologist. And I had this notion of kind of an expert sitting in the room doing treatment and the like. And um, I thought the idea of really being someone who really understood human behavior would be pretty rad, and even more so that than I think than like really trying to help people, which I think is another reason why a lot of people get into the field. And but I had this vague notion that you kind of needed to go to graduate school, and that the but it seemed like the kind of thing like, well, you just do that next in the same way you went to college. And I remember after my junior year, I'd started taking a few classes. I was not the best student in undergrad and really had to turn the ship around, and so it was taking a while. But I started taking. I did this job as a mental health technician or a milieu therapist, sometimes they're called, in a psychiatric hospital, and really opened my eyes to you know the phenomena that is psychopathology, and everything it covers. And it didn't discourage me. If anything, it encouraged me. It was gratifying to be helpful to people, while at the same time, it was clearly very challenging. Um, and then I went into my senior year, and it was like the kind of thing where I was like, I have no prep. Everything was people were telling me is like, you can't do this because you don't have good grades and you don't have research experience and you don't have all of the credentials and pedigree you need to be able to go on to the next step. And that was a big surprise for me. And undeterred, I just sort of said, okay, well, what's the next thing I got to do? Glossing over some details here, I ended up going on into a master's degree. And there I started really being focused on research because I had to. I had to undo my undergraduate dalliances. And I was, very focused there. I was ambitious there, et cetera. And then I went on to PhD school, and I was just still moving forwards, but I didn't exactly know, like, I didn't have, I knew I really enjoyed research. I knew I really liked clinical work as well. And I think one thing that worked out well for me at the time was I found a mentor and lab that would tolerate, both of those interests, and I even being able to talk freely about them. But I didn't have to do this thing where I had to say, like, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to be a professor at an R1 university. Because if that had been the key phrase, the open sesame, if you will, for graduate school, I would have failed that test. But I found my place. And then that got shaped over time, I think. And but you asked me about sort of like when did I really feel confident, like I could do it. I remember this thing. Our first year of PhD school, our first clinical supervisor, who was fired the year afterwards for being incompetent and for reasons that I don't quite understand. I was too young and naive to understand the politics then. He said to me something that has always stuck with me is he said, you know, successful faculty are a bunch of quick studies who are willing to fake it till they make it. And not that I mean, I definitely think you can take that too far. But that intuition combined with my own personality has been enough to push me towards being willing to say, take risks that have paid off and say, yeah, this seems intimidating, or I'm not sure 100% that I can do this, but I'm willing to act as if, and with a fair amount of confidence that I can figure this out and do a passable job or maybe even a good job at it.
Yeah.
And that has allowed me to say, when presented with intimidating but and challenging next steps, but reasonable next steps for wherever I am, I've sort of been willing to say, okay, I'll push for that as opposed to backing off, which I think some people do.
So you went to undergrad and did your PhD at Penn State, and of course, your PhD you worked with Aaron. So I've never really asked any of Aaron's students or Aaron about this. Like, what is the day to day like working with him and his, I mean, I have a good sense of this. I know Aaron well, etc. I know many
Yeah.
of his students, but like this is a weird thing because many of us are in this position to mentor PhD students, and we there's similarities, of course, but I think we all kind of have these individual ways of doing it. I know with my advisor, he was exactly the right kind of advisor for me. He basically left me alone, but he was always available. So I
Hmm.
could have lunch with him every day. But if I didn't show up for 6 months, he never would have asked any questions, which was exactly the kind of person I happen to need. I
Yeah.
sent my sense is Aaron is not exactly like that. So like what was it like to work with Aaron? Like what was just like practical day to day?
You know, I actually would have described it somewhat similar to that.
Yeah.
Maybe not identical. I mean, I think, there's, differences in interpersonal style. I don't know Les as well as you know Aaron and Les. So I can't speak to the direct relativeness, but I was going to say that much the way that Les was perfect for you, Aaron was the perfect advisor for me. What I tell many students now when they ask me, or what I talk about with colleagues, is I say, there's as many um, mentors as there are students because it's such a, dyadic process. It's not, each person shapes the other in certain ways. And but I think it was very similar in the sense that Aaron was very supportive, and but also not very directive in the sense that he wasn't trying to force me to go one particular way. I think there was a lot of times where I was saying something like, I want to do this, and he'd say, okay, let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
And would, you know, kind of like a what do they call it these days? A bulldozer parent, with not a helicopter parent. Like he would be
Clear
there to try
path.
to clear the path, and facilitate and support in that way. So for me, that worked out really well. Um, that was my experience of him. And so the day to day was, he was not checking in a lot, that sort of thing.
So we came up together, but I was just a little bit like a year or two ahead of you. And I remember a time, I think at Sitar maybe, where I had had a job and I was just, I think maybe I had been my first PhD student and I was trying to figure out how to be an advisor. And I talked to Aaron a lot about this. And I was asking him questions about how it was going. At the time, I think probably Nicole was gone, but maybe you and Mike were there.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're 4 years my senior in academic time in
Is that
academic,
true? Wow. Okay. Wow. I'm nearly
right?
dead.
You graduated 2008. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 20, 2012 vintage.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So you are a lot younger than me. Uh, so I was asking him about this, and I remember him saying something like, well, Mike's doing this and that. And I'm trying, maybe Emily was just starting, or I don't remember exactly who was there, but he was sort of saying like he was trying to make the point, you sort of have to figure out where each student is at and try to bulldoze for them, as you just said. And this is kind of the point that he was trying to make to me. So he was like, well, don't try to be too heavy-handed, just kind of lay back and see what they're doing, what they're interested in, what they're good at, and see how you can help them. And he said something that when it was? It was during the sitar when you did your Aiden's Technicolor Dreamcoat talk. Do you remember this?
Toronto?
Like
Yeah.
multi-surface. Like it looked like the background of my thing. There was all these like, here's the cells and how this correlates with that. And he said something like, Aiden's just doing Aiden things. And which, if you
I
know
was gonna
Aaron, what
say
that means is like Aiden's gonna be fine. Like he doesn't need mentoring. I just like let Aiden go off and do whatever Aiden wants to do, and I think it's gonna work out okay.
that's kind of him to say that. He might wanted to rein me in on that Technicolor Dreamcoat thing. Like I sometimes look back on some of that stuff and that time I was like, what was I doing? No complaints. I think it worked out fine. And I think there were benefits to being able to just spend time doing stuff that I guess I learned something. But it didn't always turn into a clear product that advanced something.
Well, yeah, you took. I mean, you took some risks, but I mean, you look back. If you've been doing this long enough, you look back at some of the papers that you were on, and you're like, dude, I took this stats class with Bruce Thompson, who was a great stat teacher, and I gave this presentation, and he said, "This is good," and this journal that I'm an editor of, like, is looking for like demonstration papers. He's like, you should just write this up and send it there. And he was the editor, so it's sort of an inside job.
Yeah.
And and of course, as we said, we're ambitious. It's like, yeah, paper, single author paper about methods, sign me up. I'm there. And the paper was how to do moderation and mediation in cross-sectional data. And I still get stuff on like ResearchGate or whatever that people are like citing this. I'm like, is there a way to retract? I mean, I faked the data. I was explicit, but I faked the data as a demonstration. Like this was the whole idea. Never
Sure.
mentioned how stupid the idea of mediation in cross-sectional designs was. It didn't have to, I mean, I suppose it didn't have to be. The data could have been anything since I made them up. But yeah, that's one that makes me cringe every time I think about somebody citing it.
I've got a candidate gene paper,
Yeah.
but nobody cites it, so I don't have to
Okay,
cringe
well, you're
that
better
much.
off. Right. Okay, good. I should probably like have it scrubbed for my H index or something. I don't know if it's in my H index or not, but I should probably, yeah.
Well, there's lots of things that one can say about that sort of thing, but one thing that has now that we're talking about this that I do talk about with mentees a fair amount is that you know I, I've become known, and in fact, it's been a large part of my success in my career has been as someone who understands quantitative methods pretty well, can implement them well, and can teach them well. And I personally, have often felt a little bit like a fraud, in the sense that, I'm not a quantitative methodologist by training. And, I sort of play one on TV, but I'm not really one. And there's always this sort of nagging voice of like, well, you don't really know what you're talking about. One has to ask themselves, like, do I really understand this? Do I really get this? And there's plenty of experiences in our careers that are right there ready to tell you about how poorly you do understand, well, anything. Um, but nonetheless, this has been a big part of my career and has, been some of the stuff I've been really proud of in terms of, especially during my job at Pitt. It really led, you know, doing that sort of stuff there changed the culture around quantitative methods, improved the rigor that folks were working on, and it was a lot of fun, and the students really responded to it. Um, but so this comes up, and students will talk to me about it and be like, "Well, how you must basically they treat me like I must be a phenom," and this doesn't jibe with my own experience of feeling a little bit like fraud. But when I think about it, and the thing I tell them is, I said, when it, the reason I ended up where I am is not because I'm a phenom. I might have, maybe some talents that other people don't have, but my experience is that I just spent more time caring about it and doing more of it. And so I just spent hours doing stuff that most people would probably consider irrelevant or a waste of time, but it sharpened the edge. So I would spend hours running factor analyses and just wondering, like, why did it come out that way instead of this way?
Yeah.
Why did these coefficients change when I changed this? And I don't think, and the Technicolor Dreamcoat talk, and maybe there's a way to, put that in the show notes kind of thing. I don't know where those slides are. Um, that was that kind of thing. Like that certainly did not turn into a paper, and I think there were some senior colleagues who were kind of disappointed about that. But I sure ended up understanding the nuances of circumplex structure a fair amount from that, you know, side quest, so to speak.
I think this is really the way I think about it. And that's how I think about it and how I try to teach it is, I mean, there are statisticians, there are methodologists like proper quant people who could do a factor analysis by hand with paper and pencil without notes, right?
Yeah.
And there are people who are cookbook users who are just like, I have two groups, like push the button for the t-test, and that's about what I know how to do.
Yeah.
To me, it's not so much trying to be either one of those, or it's trying to avoid the second, but it's not trying to be the first. It's more like, do I really understand what's going on? And is this like the right way to think about how to use the data that I have to answer the kinds of questions that I'm interested in? Or is this like, and there's of course technical things like, is this the right estimator? You can get into the very specific things that you need to be able to figure out or whatever. But there's like books or there's resources for that. But it's, to me, it's more like one step removed of like, okay, so you're doing a type model. Like, why do you believe that there are qualitatively different types of people? Or is this just like a
Yeah.
convenient way to represent data and you know that it's kind of wrong in basic ways? Or do you like believe it and can you defend that? Or there's so many examples like this. To me, this is really, this is what I kind of aim for because the other thing is, I mean, people who are now getting their PhDs are being, I mean, I was trained in like regression and ANOVA and there was like 1 day effect analysis. You had very good training at Penn State because you had a whole quant thing with Peter and all those guys and Neelam, but like for like the stuff that's done now, the longitudinal kinds of models, the various kinds of, I mean, and we're getting to LLM and all kinds of other things that like are just blowing the whole world up. Where it's not like you can read Hayes, know the general linear model, and now you're ready to do statistics for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
So I think aspiring to know like every model inside and out, if you're not a quant person, is kind of like a fool's errand. On the other hand, if you have a paper with your name on it and you don't understand why the method was used, like if you can't explain that to an undergrad, like this is why this is the right method and this is how it was conducted, even though I don't know exactly why they picked this estimator or whatever.
Yeah.
This to me is what I kind of aspire to.
Yeah. No, I think that's really well said, and I would sign on to that statement
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, and now you're doing this whole, you just got done with this whole Michigan workshop thing. Do you get any sleep while that's happening or didn't you, are you doing that now or that just happened, right?
You mean quant workshops in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the summer? Yeah. No, we're in the thick of it, part of the year. We do. It's grown in. I've been doing this for 10 years now. Actually, this is my 10th summer doing it, and it's grown a lot now. It's standalone business with partners and stuff like that. But no, the busy part of the year is May, June, a little bit into July, where I teach workshops on, extensions of the general linear model, like structural equation modeling, multi-level modeling, and mostly for um, longitudinal data, both panel and intensive longitudinal data. And so May and June, I'm really sweating, and not just because it's getting hot outside.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
nice of you to take the time to hang out. So
yeah.
predictable. I sent the email to like a few different people, and so predictable. You were the first person to respond and the first person to schedule.
Oh,
This
well,
is
that's
usually
good.
the feedback that I get too of like, why are you so fast?
Well, I'm bimodal though.
Oh
I
yeah.
think I'm either instant or infinite in my response lag.
The reason I'm instant, as I always tell people, is because I know otherwise I won't be. I'll be infinite, as in never. It's not like if an email goes beyond like the first page
Yeah,
of
it's
my,
gone.
it's gone forever. So I'm obsessive because I know I'm so low in conscientiousness that I'll forget it and I won't care.
Yeah. No, well, we share that, although I think I don't have whatever it takes to force myself to be obsessive about everything. And I will say that, especially for, trainees who come and say like, "Oh man, I'm so busy," et cetera. I'm like, just wait.
I just
Um,
had this talk with a PhD student who's applying to be an assistant professor. We have a little different system here, but he's applying to be an assistant professor in the German system. And he's like, what is it? It's like, well, when you went from undergrad to PhD, it felt like you went from like this, it was like a mushroom, and now you've got this. An assistant professor is like a mushroom cloud from a nuclear bomb. And then a full professor is like, there's just no way you're going to be able to, it's unimaginable as a PhD student what it's like.
no, yeah,
And
no,
yet,
it really.
and yet we make it.
We do, but I have thought about this specifically, and I'm not necessarily proud of about what I'm or proud of what I'm about to say, but I'll say it anyway, because I have tenure. So there's almost everything filters through email, of course. An email is a very fast, very deep, and wide river of content flowing through my computer. And I can reach out and pick out a few things from it, and I cannot reach out and pick out everything from it. And, things come down the river sometimes, and I've basically gotten to the point where I'm like, I can't do everything, so I'm just going to stop doing things that I I don't think are absolutely important, or and so I just let them go. And I do occasionally have I feel really guilty about it. And then I tell myself, but I don't like feeling guilty about it, of course. And then I say, like, well, what's going to happen? Are they going to kick me off? Are they going to fire me? Are they, fill in the blank? And most of the time, no. So I just shrug, and I feel, and I will tell people sincerely, I feel bad for not responding, and I do mean that. But I just couldn't.
But we all have to make these choices because the truth is, all of our inboxes are fuller than any. I mean, you could do a bad job responding to everything, I suppose. But there's just this is something we've talked about before, and I asked lots of people about this. Of like, when you get to this career stage, you're kind of like, I don't know if you're at your peak or not, but you've kind of like you've done the things you need to prove that you deserve your job, and
Right.
now you've got like a good chunk of your career left. And there's this question of like, what are you going to do with it? And you could just like be the bear trying to pick salmon randomly out of a stream, but it's also like ideally you'd have some kind of like, coherent idea of how you spend your time, right? And so
Yeah.
then, and people have very different answers. Like what drives, like you could also just not go to work. You could just, if you didn't feel guilty at all, you could just, I mean, as you said, you've got tenure. You could show
Yeah.
up to your classes and spend the rest of the time knitting or whatever, and couldn't, in some level, couldn't get fired, right? And the idea of tenure is that no one would do that if they worked hard enough to get tenure. There's some intrinsic thing happening. So, but the intrinsic thing really varies across people. We've talked about this before, but I'd be
Yes.
curious to hear if you had a
On the
pie chart of
recording
like,
now, what
yeah,
you need
now
me
that
to
it's
recreate
for the
that for?
future. Yeah. Yeah. See if you can replicate your last answer because I remember it.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that really stands out for me, and I feel like I don't, I was actually talking about this exact thing that I'm about to share this past week, and I can't remember when it crystallized for me, but it crystallized at some point within the past, 15 years, where I realized that when I retire, people will remember me for about a week.
Yeah,
And that's only if I go to a conference a week later. And if not, I will be forgotten.
totally.
And that doesn't bother me at all. I think it really bothers some of our colleagues, but I just don't care.
Yeah.
And so for me, there is one large part of this that is about, well, so while I'm doing this, what do I want? Because it's only going to be as permanent as I am in the game. As soon as I'm out of the game, it all goes away. And so one part of that is I would like people to look at me and say, that guy does good work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Aiden, yeah, we know him. He does solid work. That would feel very gratifying that if when people heard my name while I'm still in it, people didn't bring up like a kind of response.
Yeah.
You know, that they just said, "Oh yeah, no," and I guess that's respect or something like that. But I would like to earn it by saying by doing it well, so that when people looked at it, they said, "Yeah, that's solid work."
Yeah.
The other part is I find I find a lot of gratification from working with mentees and particularly graduate students, but postdocs have been really rewarding to work with as well. And the process of working with them is a lot of fun because they have different ideas. They push you to think in different ways, and essentially, uh, the process of working with them is intrinsically interesting, and it has this benefit of it helps them get to where they need to go. And I think the that process is really sustaining, even though it's, challenging sometimes because you're trying to help this person find a career in this job that's challenging. It's intellectually challenging. It's challenging because of the nature of the job, all sorts of things like that. You know, one of the mentors in my career, we mentioned Aaron as my doctoral advisor, but postdoctorally on internship and then into postdoc, Paul Pilkonis at University of Pittsburgh was a big influence on me. And Paul was different, but in a lot of ways. And but I remember there was this thing that happened where early on when I went to internship, I had applied for an F-32 or an independent postdoctoral fellowship to go work at Buffalo with where my wife was training with Len Sims. And these things don't tend to work out the first time you submit them, but this was my, good faith effort to try and end up being with my wife after I graduated graduate school. And the deal was at the University of Pittsburgh, where I was doing my clinical internship at Western Psych, they sort of expected you to stick around for a couple years and do postdoc there, and ideally transition into faculty there in their psychiatry department. And Paul had accepted me with the understanding that that was certainly something I was open to. You don't have to sign away your life and sign in blood or anything like that. But there's sort of an understood that that's the way things would go. So I submit this grant the summer before I show up for internship, and by God, that fucking thing hits, and it gets like an 11th percentile or 13th percentile, something really, really low and in the fundable range. So I have to go talk to Paul about this, and I'm all sorts of nervous because I got to go tell this guy that basically, like, yeah, while I said I was open to this, I was also actively working to do something else. And Paul is this old psychoanalytically trained psychologist, and he has the disposition for it. Like, he's often very quiet.
Totally.
And so I said, I explained it to him, and I said, this hit, I think I'm going to want to take it. And the worst part too is there was something about it, and if you understand how U.S. grants work, that you often have to respond to critiques. And to respond to the critiques, one of the best things could have done was to have Paul write me a letter of support saying,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, I'll help with this thing that they saw as a limitation, but I can fill in the gap here. So imagine going to ask someone this, like, hey, I'm doing this other thing, and I would also like your help with it. And Paul was very gracious and just said, what do you need me to do? And I don't remember exactly what I said. I said something like, really? And he said, you know, your task is to figure out where you want to go, and shame on you if you can't. My task is to help you get there, and shame on me if I don't. And that was a really powerful mentoring moment for me, and something I've always tried to, you know, do for my trainees moving forward, because it was selfless. The focus was on, what it should be. How do we get this young person where they want to go and help them both pick that, but in a selfless way, and then give them whatever they need to do that.
It's also generative. And this goes back to something you said before about this thing of like, is the open sesame phrase, I want to be an R1 researcher, when everyone with a job like ours knows many PhD students when they're first starting out have no idea what they want to do. We don't know if they have the competency or interest in doing the thing that they haven't actually demonstrated or practiced doing yet. And many people change their mind most people are in their 20s when they do this. Many people change their mind about basic life decisions at that life stage. And like it's a normal thing to do. And so that's why, and by the way, there's not enough jobs for everyone to have one if everyone wants one. So it's a kind of really dumb thing to say. And so I think the attitude as an advisor has to be, I'm gonna try to like help you figure out where you want to get by the end of this, and hopefully when you're walking out the door with the PhD, you have a pretty solid idea. Sometimes that doesn't even happen, but hopefully the idea is like by the end, now you have a really solid foundation and direction
Yeah,
to go in. Yeah,
100%. And I can honestly say, with no qualifications, I do not give a shit where my students go
yeah,
from
yeah. Me too.
graduation.
Yeah,
At the same time, I will also say that if you come in without at least a sincere interest in doing a lot of research over the next several
Right.
years, it's not going to be a good fit, and neither of us is going to be very happy. But and this I say explicitly, if after third year, after or fill in the blank exactly how long, but that's approximately my guess for how long it takes. You've been exposed to a lot of things in your courses. You've done some research projects. You've started to see patients working with, your clinical placements. If you decide you want to be doing something very different than this whole research game that we've talked about, well, yeah, shame on me if I don't help you get there.
Yeah. When we were coming up, one of my favorite conferences was Sitar. And this really interesting thing happened with Sitar because the whole idea at the time was like, I mean, let's be honest, there was like four or five regular attendees. Aaron was one of them, and there was a handful of others, Debbie and Len and a few other people, Mike Gertman,
Mhm.
and they're students, right? And the idea was like, well, we got to create a platform for the students to be able to think out. And there was a talk about should we have a journal and all this kind of stuff. And pound for pound, when we were PhD students and early career psychologists, I feel like that was like the best on average talks of any conference that I went to. Like they were solid from top to bottom.
100%.
And
Yeah.
this interesting paradoxical thing happened where the better strategy, if the idea was to promote interpersonal theory, the better strategy turned out to be get out of sitar and expand to other places. So you're involved in high top and SRP and et cetera, or SPA or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think this was a good strategy. Now you're editing one of the main journals in clinical psychology, and we've done a lot of stuff. At the same time, sitar is just like puttering along. And I've been to the last two times, but I don't know that everyone who used to go has been going every single time. So it's this kind of like bittersweet thing where like, and I'm always asking like, what should sitar be? And this is a common conversation at sitar, like, what should it be? And the people who are running it have been very creative and having like online talks and having these like hybrid kinds of things. And um, but it's a parallel in a way to what you just described, in the sense that like if you want interpersonal theory to go off and flourish, maybe you have to let go of the idea of doing it this way and think about it a different way.
That's an interesting analogy. And uh, yeah, I agree. Sitar was a fantastic crucible for us in terms of developing our career. And I've actually been burned a little bit by it. I think in one part, the student talks there were so good
Yeah.
that I've often advocated for giving students more of a platform at other conferences, only to find that maybe it doesn't generalize quite as much as I thought. But that aside, it really was fantastic and fertile intellectual ground for those of us who are going right. Though the field has changed somewhat along with the past, 15 to 20 years since, sitar was in its heyday. Um, and, the field is just so much bigger and so much more integrative in a lot of ways, and I think there's a lot about the interpersonal model that's very integrative, but there's also aspects of it that are very insular, and in the ways that if it's maintaining sitar as sitar by itself, maintain some of those things that
Yeah.
like I think didn't allowed people to not say, okay, how does this touch broader things? And I think, not explicitly at first, but because I love sitar and there's part of me that says I would love it to be what it was and be able to go to it, but I don't know if that could be recreated in the same way. I feel like the time is different now. Um, but one thing that really stood out for me is, and that you know early on I participated in the board the whole way through, from member at large, or from student member to member at large to president-elect to president to past president, all, the whole arc. And one of the things that I often did was chair the membership committee. And I was, I tend to be an outgoing kind of guy. And I was trying to get people to sign up and become members and that sort of thing. And this is another thing that sort of paradoxically, I think that there was more success or value perhaps in letting it stay small,
Yeah.
a small group that committed, um, than trying to grow it because I don't know that we could really
Yeah.
ever grow it. But
Well, uh,
no, well, but it is interesting that you say that there's a lot of us that have gone out into the field in various ways. And while we're not always talking only about the interpersonal model per se, the fact that we endorse it and the fact that we do talk about it sometimes, I think does force people to listen.
well, and even if people don't care about interpersonal theory, I think that you're right that the spirit, to me, the thing that attracted me in the first place is that it's integrative. It doesn't pick a side about therapy orientation. It doesn't pick a side about assessment instrument. It doesn't pick a side about research versus practice. And so I think that to the extent that if interpersonal theory can have an impact outside of sitar, to me, this it's not so much are people using circular measures in
Yeah.
their work. It's more like, can people have a more integrative spirit? I think that has had that effect.
Yeah, no, as a philosophy from that standpoint, it's hard to beat and very few come even close to
Yeah.
providing that. So I agree and I think that that has carried through in many of the aspects, like the integrative aspect. You know, I find too many areas of our science to be parochial and
Yeah.
not ecumenical. And I think the the fundamental lens, and I give Aaron Pincus a lot of credit for this. Maybe deserves all or most of the credit for really emphasizing that aspect of it and making that central and certainly core to how I see things um, from almost wherever I'm any space I'm in. I mean, one of the funny things that this is where it came up recently for me is I spend maybe too much time on social media.
You're good
And
at it, to be fair. You're
I've
like Jedi level
there are
social
better
media
though.
person.
There are many better, but I legitimately enjoy it. And one of my frequent rants is the fact that we let academic Twitter die when Elon Musk took it over. But and there hasn't been a good replacement. But the newest replacement for me is LinkedIn because LinkedIn is like all positive.
Yeah, people are nice.
People are nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it's superficial, just sort of
So excited about my
self-promotion.
new paper. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what?
You're not that
You can't.
excited.
Right, but you know what? You can't find that anywhere else right now because if you go over to like Blue Sky, like you
Yeah,
walk in
boring.
there and it's doom. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just horror. And I don't want to exist in a horror show all the time. So, but anyway, one thing that comes out across platforms is the different therapy schools love to hate on each other.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all they do. And like it's so strange. I mean, I don't see on. I mean, to be fair, I don't spend a lot of time following this stuff, but I like of no other helping field do I see this in the same way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you don't
Right.
see oncologists where the
Right. Right.
the surgical
Chemotherapy.
oncologist,
You're right.
yeah, right, like fuck those chemotherapists,
You
you
gotta do
got to cut it
surgery.
out. Yeah, the only
Yeah.
real way to
Yeah.
cure cancer is just cut it out. Like
Yeah.
what? Like they
Oh, and by the
recognize
way,
that
you
there
guys, you're all tying. By the
yeah,
way, you're all tying. Like, look at the literature. You're all tying all the time.
yeah.
So, yeah,
So it's a strange thing, and I mean, I think in sitar people have their proclivities or their preferred lenses, but there wasn't
yeah,
that level of animosity, at least not
yeah, yeah.
publicly.
I grew up with like Rorschach and MPI, and then MMPI, PAI, and SPA, which is my another one of my favorite conferences. And from the very beginning, I always thought, well, this is bizarre. Like from the
Yeah,
perspective of patient care, like what difference does it make? Really weird. I mean, it's good to learn one or two of those, but like having preferring one over the other is kind of like, what are we talking about here? It's a very
yeah.
superficial way of thinking about what our jobs
Like
are about.
you, I want you to get better, but only if you get better with my
Yeah,
preferred
yeah,
treatment.
yeah. Yeah, right. It's really weird.
What? Like,
So okay, so I gave you a homework assignment.
You
The
did.
only thing I told you prepare for, and what I thought would be interesting is if you could demonstrate, like if I don't know who's going to watch this. To be honest, my fantasy is like maybe some student would be interested in interpersonal theory.
Yeah.
And examining my motivations, I thought, no, what's really going to happen is like that week when everyone's forgotten who I am, I'm going to want to have like a record of the good times of me hanging out with my friends. I think that's probably like what's really going on here. Okay, so the homework assignment was you have an advanced PhD student. They started a collaboration that's independent from you with your support. And then they come back to you and they say their colleague invited them because they have some kind of expertise that the team doesn't have, but then they always dismiss the ideas during the project, minimize the input. And the student is like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here. I sort of feel like maybe I should step away because I'm not being respected. At the same time, this is a pretty good opportunity, and I'm worried about burning a bridge. Okay, I can share the interpersonal situation model if you wanna do it that way.
No, well, I thought this was both. I mean, maybe that'll help for a second, but I thought that was both an excellent assignment in the sense that I think this sort of thing happens a lot,
Yep.
and I've seen variations of it. Um, so there's that. On the other side, I felt like it was kind of a shitty assignment because um, it is, I feel like it's really dependent on, a lot going on with the situation. The specificity of it, like how are they being dismissed and that kind of thing. Um, I also kind of misremembered it. And so I was kind of thinking about it when I would walk my dog over the past week or so, and I was kind of misremembering it. But
Oh,
I,
then say it how you remember it. That's fine too.
I was remembering it as something a little bit less dismissive and a little bit more, um, how would I say it? That they were more being more demanding and, you know,
Oh,
uh,
right. Uh-huh.
more punitive or something in some way. And so anyway,
More BC
but
than
we can,
DE.
what's that? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
More BC and less DE than I had
Yeah,
imagined. Yeah.
exactly. Now, I will say this did to make this academic and not concrete in the way you wanted me to, mostly because I'm obstinate and autonomy taking. But I will say that I think the SASB model is much better for actual interactions than the standard interpersonal model. And I think that the SASB model has been we could spend a whole nother hour talking about this, but I think it's been for a variety of reasons it hasn't gotten its due. One of the reasons is that it's so much tied to developmental processes that like even the measures are kind of unusably developmentally oriented.
Can you see that?
Um, yeah, yeah. So uh, right. I mean, I think the um, when it comes to working in the scenario that you're talking about, I think the, some of the complementarity principles that come up for me in this type of scenario is that the you know roughly what you're describing, that the dismissiveness would probably be the advisor being a little bit, invoking hostile autonomy. In other words, they're kind of rejecting of this trainee's input. And so I think that what you're describing is the impulse for the trainee to take hostile autonomy and walk away. And maybe it's not overtly hostile, but if to the extent that the person is leaving with bad feelings about it, I think that's sort of where it would land in the take hostile autonomy section in the focus on self. But and this is a somewhat less detailed version of this, but I think the way that you might deal with this ideally, and there's nuance here, of course, because the advisor probably, or this whoever this other colleague is, that senior colleague is, probably doesn't see themselves as being hostile or dismissive. They're probably unaware of it. And so I would think about like, okay, we need to bring bring their behavior into awareness, and re-engage them in a way that would be beneficial. And I think here you know, if you think about complementarity principles in SASB, what you really want to bring them into is focus on other for friendly influence, which is often includes things like to protect. So what you want as a junior colleague, perhaps, is to now you could debate this. So there's nuance depending on exactly who this other person is. So you want to first, but you do want to bring them over to the right-hand side of the diamond
Mhm.
here. And you could, I argue that either you want to make them, have friendly influence on you, meaning have them view you as a someone that they want to help mentor and benefit. And so you could try pulling them over to friendly influence, which often, one of I think the key, sort of like in SASB terms, friendly influence is often referred to as like sort of a protect type approach, right? And so if you want to view them, and you could try to bring them over there. And so I think here adopting a more uh, adopting an approach where you try to engage them, but still taking the one down position. Here it's called friendly accept, which I don't think fits all that well, but basically trying to pull for that, trying to engage them, and trying to see them, tap into their generativity to the extent that they have it.
Mhm.
Uh, might make a lot of sense there. I think alternatively, though, maybe what you want to do is you want to assert autonomy and demonstrate that you are capable of doing these things that they originally invited you for. So you could argue you might want to pull them over to encouraging friendly autonomy, in which case, if that's more the goal, right, trying to be seen as more of a peer or something like that, and having them see you as someone that is moving up in the world with something to contribute, pulling them over to encouraging friendly autonomy might that what it shares, of course, is engagement, right?
Yeah.
Reaching out to the person, not withdrawing. But it might involve more doing things that they're not asking for.
Yeah.
They dismiss your idea. Well, go do that idea and show them
Yeah.
that it
Bring
was
it.
good. Yeah,
Bring the ruckus.
exactly.
So it sort of depends. So the moderator is the personality of the other person. If they're just kind of like not aware,
Yeah.
then maybe the friendly influence thing will make them aware of the way that your sort of your role in the team. If on the other hand, they're not respectful, then like do something to earn some respect first, and then they'll start paying more attention.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good summary. And I think that that's where a little bit of the, gauging exactly what, the other person is, maybe what their motivations are, their style is, and proceeding accordingly.
And eventually you might just have to bail.
For sure. And doing so, graciously, is always good. But, there's one thing that's really nice about having really busy lives as a trainee. And trainees do have very busy lives these days. And having another advisor that is senior enough is, you can blame a lot of shit on me, saying I'm
Yeah.
having you
Yeah.
do a bunch of stuff. And what are they going to do? Come tell me to stop telling my student to do stuff?
My partner has a very strong philosophy of like, you never regret saying no, and you often regret saying yes. And I think I'm not quite as extreme as she is, but she's right more often than she's wrong. I think this gets back to the email flood problem
Yeah.
of like, actually, I think as a PhD student, you think I'm just going to grab every opportunity I can. If I can get my name on a paper, I'm going to do whatever I can to do that. I don't want to burn a bridge. But actually, there's lots of papers. There's lots of things to do. And the question really becomes how to be selective. Like, is it really an important thing to do? Is it really helping you personally? Do you enjoy doing it? And if not, you have to ask hard questions about whether it's worth doing.
Yeah. The fly in Vipka's ointment, though, is that, and I don't know if she'll ever watch this, but that avoidance, that saying no, is often reinforced, and it's very rarely explicitly punished. But if you're paying close attention, there can be punishment out there for it.
Totally. Well, I think she's a constant second strategy person of the two strategies you listed. She's always bringing the pain, so I think she doesn't suffer from missed opportunities much.
No, no, I don't think she does either. But there are people in my life who where who differ from me in terms of approach avoidance styles. And whereas my approach style does often get punished, their avoidance style is sort of continuously
Yeah.
reinforced because the counterfactual is like,
All right.
well, what? And so, what missed opportunity? Well, who knows? I don't know. Rarely do you see what the missed opportunity was, and maybe there's ways to look at that, but obviously in life there should be balance and including in career. But yeah,
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks for doing this. You've been a great friend, great colleague for many years. Glad to
yes,
talk to you.
yeah. It's our 20-year anniversary, buddy.
All right. Cheers.
What is
I'll
that?
have to
Diamond, ruby,
I'll have to
emerald?
have some unfiltered sake by myself, I guess.
I think so. But yeah, thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me on.
Very much. See ya.
Later.